Ready, Vincent? Good morning, guys. My name is Jaime Hernandez. I'm a retired school teacher. I taught history, 29 years. And I've been volunteering here at Palo Alto for about 15 years, I think. And today I'm going to talk about Juan Nepomuceno Cortina. Can you see it up there? The name? Okay. He is sometimes known as the Robin Hood of the Valley because he was one of the few Mexicans, or Tejanos, which is what we are, that rose up against Anglo domination. Because at the time people were coming down here to the valley after the Mexican War to make their fortune. Unfortunately for them, the land was already owned by Tejanos or Mexicans. So wrangling through court, they cheated out of them. That's what this story is about. I am dressed as a Tejano. This is not a uniform, this is what they wore daily. Of course, not the poor, the well-to-do. Either a Tejano or a vaquero. And some of the things that they would carry is like this. Is my ammo pouch. This is just powder for safety reasons. If it were real, it would have a musket ball in here, 75 caliber, because my musket is 75 caliber. Well, actually, the musket ball will be about 68 caliber. And they all carry or wore one of these. You got your cup, your spoon, sewing kit, plate, whatever else you need in here. And you're from the valley, you know how to get it made. This is a gourd, in Spanish, a guaje. Just kept the water cooler longer. The United States brought down canteens made out of wood or tin. After the war moved on from here, you could see American troops with gourds. They were taken from the Mexican dead or the prisoners. Okay. This is the Cortina Wars went from 1859 to 1861 because there were two different versions. Juan Nepomuceno Cortina was born on May 16, 1824. And if you can show the picture, Ruben, of Cortina. That's him. He was about 5'6", green eyes, ruddy complexion, reddish brown hair, and beard. And most people back then were 5'3" to 5'8", see average. He was born in Camargo, Tamaulipas, up the river. He was a son of Estefana Goseacochea, I hope I'm saying that right, and Trinidad Cortina. When Cortina was still a young man, his mother inherited a portion of a large land grant, what is today mostly Cameron County. It was called Portero del Espíritu Santo, meaning pastor of the Holy Spirit. This grant encompassed the area around what is today Brownsville. You show the land grant. When the Mexican War started, Cortina was part of the army that fought here. He wasn't in the regular army. He knew he was a very good horseman. So the commander of the Mexican army at the time, Arista, directed him, he was 22 years old, to form a brigade of irregular cavalry. They would be dressed in their daily clothes, similar to this, not uniforms, because they were not part of the regular army. He formed a brigade of cavalry. He called it El Tamaulipas Brigade. He commanded that brigade here at Palo Alto and in Resaca de la Palma. The Battle of Palo Alto took part its place in May 8th, 1846. The next day, May 9th, Resaca de la Palma, which is about 7 miles down the road on Paredes Line. Now, Cortina had very little affection for the centralist government at the time. So after the battle here in Resaca, he pretty much disappeared, did very little in defense of his homeland. When the war ended, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which was signed on February 2nd, 1848, was signed between the two countries to stop the war. Mexico lost 55% of its territory, which is today parts of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, parts of Utah, Colorado, California. 55%. And I don't know if you ever heard the saying, poor Mexico, so far from God, so close to the United States. One of the Mexican president, Porfirio Diaz, said that. Because what happened in 1849? They discovered gold in California. Hence, the San Francisco 49ers. Now, this is the important thing. The treaty gave Mexican citizenship to everybody, all the Mexican Tejanos that were here, unless they requested to return to Mexico. That was Article 8. Article 10 of the treaty guaranteed all the land grants that the Mexicans owed at the time. But before the U.S. Congress would ratify the treaty, the United States Congress changed the original language. And that meant that changing the original language denied Tejanos the land grants that they own. It would have to be adjudicated in court now. The problem is, a lot of people didn't speak English, and a lot of Anglos did not speak Spanish. Cortina didn't speak English. Okay, so it's problem number one. The Mexican claims in Texas, because Texas was not part of the United States, and they had gained independence in 1836, also wasn't valid. They had certain conditions to meet before they could give them the land grants. And of course, that didn't happen. The famous story, the Vallis, on May 26, 1848, there was a document by the American government called the Protocols of Querétaro, in which the amendments to the original treaty were explained to Mexico. For some reason, they agreed, signed it. Now, to put everything in historical context, I need to back up a little bit. In the eyes of Mexican Texans, one of the most pressing problems was the deeply rooted racism that engulfed the state. With the legacy of the Alamo and San Jacinto, which is 10 years earlier, 1836, along with the triumph of the United States in the Mexican War, still in the mind of most Anglo-Texans, Tejanos became second-class citizens in the land that they had once owned. With the legacy of the Alamo, Tejanos inherited the bitterness of the Anglo conquerors. But it was not so much as the myth, but as how the truth came to be distorted that was so damaging to the Mexicans and Tejanos. Now, take a little break. I brought this book. It's a couple of years old, very old. It's called Forget the Alamo, written by 3 white men. And they say the story of the myth of the Alamo is nowhere near the actual facts. They say that the reason for this war, Texans fought for independence from Mexico, was because of slavery. Mexico would not allow slaves. But they gave them a special permission for 10 years to have their slaves. Then when they cut it off, that's when the trouble began. Started raising up in revolution. This is this book. It's pretty good. It tells you exactly, now whether you believe it or not, it's up to you. Okay. The Tejanos endured the cruel treatment as more and more pro-slavery, anti-Catholic Anglo settlers poured into Texas. When Stephen F. Austin first brought his settlers, they had to agree to be Catholic, to get rid of their slaves, and to abide by the Mexican rules. They did. The Anglos that came over believed that Tejanos, they were viewed as inferior and they could be plundered for their land and possessions. Tejanos not only were racially inferior, but the Anglos believed that they were cruel, cowardly, and treacherous. Now, even the father, Stephen F. Austin, who is regarded as one of the best men ever to come to Texas, he was a bit racist. He said that the Texas War of Independence against Mexico was a war of extermination by the Mexicans, a war of barbarism and despotic principles waged by the mongrel Spanish, Indian, and Negro race against civilization and at the Anglo-American race. The sixth president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, saw it differently. He said, in this war, the flag of liberty will be that of Mexico. And ours, I blush to say, the flag of slavery. To give you an example of the attitude at this time, the Mexican War started in 1846. The Cortina War started in 1859. In 1859, in the United States, there was a society, semi-military society, secret society, known as the Knights of the Golden Circle. Well, they had their plans. They saw Mexico as a bridgehead for the slavery empire. Not only Texas, southern United States, Texas, Mexico, but Central America and stretching into the Caribbean. That was their idea. That's the attitude of the Anglo-Texans, and you can see how they would treat Mexicans or Tejanos. This discrimination gives rise to Juan Nepomuceno Cortina, called Cheno by his friends, family. He saw how his mother had been cheated of part of her land, the area where Brownsville stands today. He was convinced that there was a clique of lawyers, judges, politicians that had let this happen. They were in cahoots to let this happen. Merchants such as William P. Neal, Henry Kahn, Adolphus Glavecki, Richard King from the King Ranch, and Mifflin Kennedy, who were part of that clique. Now, to give you a little bit about Mifflin Kennedy, he is the one for Kennedy County is named for. He married a very wealthy Mexican woman, Petra Vela. She was wealthy already, so combining the money, they control all the area around Sarita, that area, up to Victoria. In Sarita, there's a museum which shows their portraits. Supposedly she was beautiful. Anyway, she married him. Her son became famous during the Mexican Revolution and the French intervention. Adrian Vela, her son, served for the Union Army, the Confederate Army, Juarez, who was fighting against the French, and he was shot by the French as a spy. And he's buried today at the old cemetery in Brownsville. You can see his grave right there. He was 22, and he was shot. The story goes that Mifflin Kennedy and Petra were on their way down with a ransom to pay for his release. By the time they got here, too late. Now, there was a Catholic priest here in Brownsville named Emmanuel H.D. Domenech. He labeled many of the large merchants, which I mentioned before, and capitalism, the Rio Grande, as the scum of society, men whose greed knew no end. To Anglo-Texans, Cortina was a bandit, a rustler, and a murderer. He'd been charged with killing some guy named Juan de la Luna. Excuse me, that was the guy that did it. He was accused of killing some Mexican. Of course, they couldn't prove it. There was a warrant for his arrest, but supposedly the Anglos in Brownsville, the Mexicans, were afraid of him. He was an excellent shot, excellent horseman, and had nerves of steel. In the valley, the Mexican Tejanos knew him as the Robin Hood, the savior of the Mexicans. And Arthur said of Cortina that he was one of the few Mexicans with a temerity to challenge Anglo domination. One of the things they charged them with was rustling cattle, horses. It was pretty common everywhere, especially along the border. They would raid into Mexico, steal little cattle, Mexicans would raid, steal them back, and take others. Cortina did that, to be sure, but so did a bunch of Anglos that were here. The murder you were accused of, he was cleared later. A man named Juan de la Luna was the actual murderer, so he was cleared of that. But here, that the opinion of the Anglos didn't change. Foremost among the entrepreneurs who dominated the economy of Brownsville and the county was Charles Tillman. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. He was the one that founded Brownsville. There's a street named after him called St. Charles. Main Street, Brownsville, Elizabeth Street, named for his wife. Some of them named for his kids. He was originally from Connecticut, came down here, became wealthy. After the Mexicans were defeated in the Mexican War, Stillman bought title to a disputed area, 4,676 acres of land from a man named Jose Narciso Cortina, which was Cortina's cousin. The problem was that Cortina's mother, Estefania Goseacochea Cortina, also claimed that land as part of her original land grant. Narciso, his cousin, had no right to sell it because since Cortina's father had remarried and the heirs of his second wife, which is Stefana, inherited those titles, which was Cortina, his brother, sisters, not Narciso Cortina Jose, his present. But Charles Tillman didn't care. He bought it anyway. Stillman started to buy land around the town of Brownsville. He set up a company to sell lots in the disputed area. In 1852, Cortina's mother, Doña Estefana Cortina's Goseacochea, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, filed a suit to defend her titles against Stillman's land company. On January 15,